and welcome to the Paid Media Lab podcast. My name is James. I'm the content lead here at Lunio. And on this episode, I will be speaking with leading Google Ads expert, Adriaan Dekker. Since launching his Google Ads newsletter back in November 2022, Adriaan has documented every single minor and major update to the Google Ads platform, making him one of the most widely recognized and respected voices within the PPC community. In this conversation, we'll be getting into the advantages of using the profit on ad spend metric, or POAS metric, for paid search campaigns, as opposed to the more traditional and widely used return on ad spend, or ROAS metric. So if you've only ever tracked ROAS and you haven't given much thought to alternative success metrics, this episode will give you plenty of reasons to consider placing greater focus and emphasis on profitability. So let's get into the profit on ad spend metric and how you can use it to significantly increase tangible business growth. Adriaan, welcome to the Paid Media Lab. Delighted to have you on today.
Hi James, thanks for having me.
So firstly, I just wanted to say big congratulations on hitting 100K followers on LinkedIn. That's a huge milestone.
Yes, thanks. It is a huge milestone. I set it as a goal last year because I wanted to aim at a goal to get the best out of me. So I was calculating in my head like, okay, how many followers can I get in 1 year? And during that time and that growth rate, I was like, okay, 100K should be possible. I think it's ambitious, but it's possible. And I hit it earlier than that I thought I would hit it. Very happy. And Google Ads has 700,000 followers, I think. So still need to catch up with them and outgrow them.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I can see that happening because I remember we recorded a webinar, a Lunio webinar back in February, and we had a conversation back then about your kind of goal. And, it did seem ambitious at the time. I think you were maybe around 45K or maybe around there when we did it in February. And your Google Ads newsletter has been growing a lot recently too, and I know you've been making some changes there. So is there anything you could let people know about your Google Ads newsletter?
Yeah, so I have a new Google Ads newsletter, and that is a newsletter where you pay a small fee, and then I will go a bit further and deeper into the news. And then I will also add some templates and files, for example, to that newsletter. And then I still have my basic newsletter, where I will just post my LinkedIn items. But the big difference is that in the paid version, I will put the files and more information.
Nice. So definitely worth checking that out. And today, we're going to be doing a deep dive on the profit on ad spend, or POAS metric, for paid search campaigns. So we'll get right into it. And firstly, Adriaan, could you let people know what is POAS and how does it differ from the more traditional and widely used ROAS metric, or return on ad spend?
Yeah, so return on ad spend is basically where you send the revenue to Google Ads, and revenue per product can be very different. So for example, some people maybe have one big campaign with all their products, but for one product you need a ROAS of 800%, and for the other product maybe 400%. So what are you going to do in that case? Are you going to put it on 800? Are you going to put it on 400? Or are you going in between? Right? It's very hard. Then you could also say, okay, let's split it, but then you have less data, and maybe that's not doable for every campaign, for example. So that's why it's a good strategy for sure. But I think POAS is much better because you can bid for every product. And if the POAS is above 1, you are making profit. So the big difference here is that with ROAS, you are sending the revenue to Google Ads. So for example, the mic that I have is €100. Somebody buys it, that €100 is being sent to Google Ads. With POAS, for example, I'm making, let's say for example, €30 on this mic. I'm sending €30 to Google Ads. So that's the big difference.
Nice. And with that in mind, would you say that there are certain types of businesses that tend to benefit most from using POAS? Is this very much an e-commerce retail predominantly strategy, or can this work in other verticals as well?
Now this is definitely for web shops. And the thing with the web shops is that it can be for B2C but also B2B, because B2B is also getting a lot of more web shops. I think that's a trend in general for the last few years, and also for the upcoming years, that it becomes more normal to have a web shop as a B2B company, for example. And yeah, like I said before, with different margins, especially, this is very interesting. And the thing is, when you have a lot of products, you have a lot of different margins.
Yeah, so on that issue of margins, let's dig into that a little bit. So how can you ensure that you're accurately calculating your profit margins to ensure you're using POAS effectively? I know there are certain key costs that you need to be accounting for, and some of those might be slightly more hidden costs that are kind of easily overlooked or might sometimes be missed. So what are the key things that businesses need to keep in mind when they're calculating those margins?
So I think this is another part. Like the first part is, for what kind of businesses is POAS? So web shop, different margins, then it's very interesting. Then the second part is, the company needs to be ready. It needs to know their margins, for example, and it needs to install the cost of sold good for Google, or it needs to have a tool like Profit Metrics, for example. But you still need to have the margin, and you can do that in different ways. For example, when I work with WordPress, for example, and when I install Profit Metrics, it's just a field where I can add it in. But you could also, for example, send it with Excel. And with Google, for example, you need to install the cost of sold goods and also need to fill that in so that they know the cost of the good.
Yeah, that makes sense. So are those the kind of, or are there any other initial steps alongside those ones you just mentioned that businesses should take if they are interested in making the transition from ROAS to POAS for paid search?
Yeah, it is tricky, because sometimes you have these shipping costs, for example. And with Profit Metrics, for example, I had one client and it was really hard because he did not really know his shipping costs. It was more general shipping costs, for example. So we need to calculate the shipping costs, and there are advanced ways how you can send that back. It's a bit more technical. But for example, some companies are losing money on their shipping cost. And if your POAS is very aggressive, maybe you are losing some money. So you need to know your cost. That's very important. And also like I said, the cost of shipping. But also take in mind that some companies have a very high customer lifetime value. So you also need to understand these things. So you can blindly stare on POAS, but maybe you will just take a loss on your first order from a customer, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned LTV there and things like that. So does the use of POAS kind of significantly affect budget allocation across different products and campaigns? And is that the kind of primary goal here, is to shift your budget towards those most profitable long-term products? Or how is POAS going to affect budget allocation?
I think it will take more volume. You will get more volume. So for example, an example is, for example, you have this mic that I'm speaking with, and then you have another mic, and maybe my mic has a ROAS of 300 and the other 800, and then I will put it on 700. Then the mic that only needs 300, for example, will lose volume, of course, because it's way higher. So when I will use POAS, for example, there's a big chance that I will sell the lower ROAS a lot more.
Yeah, that
so
makes
more
sense.
volume for certain products. So that's just a very positive thing, I think.
And in relation to bidding strategies that you might be using, does POAS, the switch into POAS, have any impact on automated bidding strategies that you might be using?
Yeah, it takes some time, to be honest. If you're switching from ROAS to POAS, what I have seen with one client that I switched just a few weeks ago, it takes some time. But you can, the thing is, for example, if I would have a budget of €1,000 per day and I would put a ROAS of 300 on that. But it's not spending 1,000, for example. It's only spending 500. But my ROAS, it protects that spend, you know. I don't want to be limited by budget, so I will do 1,000, for example, so that if there is a crazy week or a crazy day, for example, that it can spend. But maybe when you switch to POAS, just have a look at that, right? Because you're just switching the whole value, and Google is still taking averages sometimes. So just check your daily budget also, you know, because the thing is with one client, I got limited by budget constantly, right? So maybe if I would had put it higher, it would spend way more, and so it can have an effect if you change it. But just look at your budget, for example, because you can also steer with your budget.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one point that might be interesting to discuss in terms of a recent PPC update and news item is the fact that Google Ads have recently just announced that they are bringing gross profit optimization as a campaign setting. And this is allowing advertisers to kind of optimize for POAS directly through Google Ads. And as you mentioned in the past, historically, if you wanted to do this, you needed a third-party tool such as Profit Metrics or something like that to help you steer on POAS. But could you maybe tell our audience a bit more about this particular Google Ads update and why you're kind of interested or excited about that?
So the first thing to know is that a lot of people already talked about POAS with the Profit Metrics solution, and Google is just a slow company. You know, they are such a big company. Changing to POAS, for example, could hurt them, maybe, you know. So that's why this is a beta, and you need to get access to this. If you do not have access, you can maybe ask your account manager, for example, if he can fix that for you. I'm not sure if he or she can do this, but it's still in beta, you know, so it's not rolled out. That's the thing with Google. They are slow. If this change would impact them, for example, I don't think they would roll it out. So I'm not sure how long this beta is going to take. Another thing is to know that it's cost of sold goods. So I don't think the shipping costs are off. So that's one thing you should definitely know for sure. I've seen people get access to the tool, but not a lot, to be honest, at this moment. I think it's just a testing phase, because this is a big change, you know, a new bidding strategy. That would be a real big change. They'd only take strategies away from us normally. So this would be a big thing if they would fully roll this out.
For sure. And one of the things like that, I guess it's difficult when it's with Google, but do you think that if Google did go ahead and roll this out and made it available to all advertisers, do you think that this would incentivize other ad platforms to go in a similar direction and try to provide more options to advertisers to optimize for profit or profit on ad spend rather than ROAS?
Yeah, so the thing is that you can already use POAS also for Meta with Profit Metrics. I think you can also use it for Bing. I think in general, Google is just the biggest advertising company, and companies are following Google. You know, TikTok now has search ads, for example. Other platforms are making PMax, for example, or they call it PMax, just broader and broader, because Google they have so much money. They are the biggest advertising platform in the world. I think others are just following Google all the time. And I think they will, of course, test this, because this is the best bidding strategy that is available right now. Of course, we never know if maybe in the future we will get some LTV added to the POAS, for example. That would be crazy if you could just add that. But I don't see that possibility right now. But maybe in the future they will come up with even something better. But I think POAS right now is the best strategy.
So right now, for anyone that is interested in experimenting with this and they want to take POAS seriously, would you say that their best option is to go with profit metrics and kind of focus on that as the main tool that they're using to work towards steering on POAS?
Yeah, definitely. It's available for everybody. You can take off shipping costs, but also payment costs, for example. And they even have server-side tracking, and really next-level server-side tracking. They call it the conversion booster. And yeah, I had just one account that I was transforming to POAS, and I think I have 20% more conversions that I can track with that booster. So that is a lot, to be honest. And they're improving the product, and the tracking also. So yeah, I would definitely use that for now.
Yeah, it makes sense. That conversion booster, I know Bob and Miles from PPC Mastery, they've kind of been plugging that conversion booster for a few years now, because Bob has noticed very similar things to yourself, Adriaan, where it was like 15% upwards additional conversions. So that can make a huge difference in terms of the amount of data that you're feeding to the algorithm. So on that note, I think we've kind of covered all the key aspects that we want to touch on today. Thank you so much for joining us, Adriaan, and really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to mention or send people towards before we close?
Yeah, so for everybody who does not have a web shop, for example, and have web forms, for example, or who are closing leads through mail, for example, or call, I would just advise you to really look into offline conversion tracking or call tracking, for example, because in those areas, those two methods are really to get a better measurement, for example, and to really see if you're making profit. So POAS is awesome for web shops, but if you're into lead gen, for example, check at calls, for example, or other offline conversion tracking solutions like Zapier or Enhanced Leads. If you want to know more, I have made some videos even, so you can just send me a message and I will send a few free videos to you on how to do offline conversion tracking.
Nice. Yeah, that's the key to the future of PPC, is gathering as much reliable data as you possibly can, and offline conversion tracking is a big part of that. So be sure to reach out to Adriaan if you are interested in getting hold of those videos, especially if you're in the B2B lead gen sector. And yeah, thanks again, Adriaan. And I'm sure by this time next year, I will expect that you'll have surpassed the 200K follower mark on LinkedIn. So very much looking forward to keeping up with your continued momentum and journey there. So thank you again, Adriaan, for your time.
Thanks for having me, James.
That's it for this episode of the Paid Media Lab. Thank you for tuning in. If you found it helpful, hit the subscribe button to get the next episode as soon as it's released. Subscribing costs nothing. It only takes a few seconds to do, but it makes a huge difference to us because it enables us to continue booking the best possible guests and delivering you great content. In the meantime, if you're looking for more free guides, tips, and tools, head to lunio.ai and click on the resources tab in the nav bar. And lastly, if you know any other marketers who'd find these strategies helpful, please do tell them about the show, and I'll see you in the next episode.